Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Today is one less person to my channel simply discerning what is true. I'm going to do a talk on psychology and Kabbalah, and I think it's chapter 30. I'm going to go reading tonight. Um, Day is the 14th day of November 2025. So this is a book that not necessarily Phil recommended to me, but the author he recommended me to. So that's why I'm reading this information to you guys. So the name of the chapter is simply called The Unconscious. This is chapter 30. And let me get a drink here. So it's simply chapter 30, The Unconscious. The Freudian view of psychology lays strong emphasis upon the id, the fesh. Indeed, Freud argued that the energy of the psyche was derived mainly from the id, which is why there is such a preoccupation with satisfying the basic needs of life so that a person can survive and propagate. This is a specific standpoint and one that relates particularly to the body and lower psyche, the unconscious being largely, according to Freudians, concerned with the id drives. The ego and the superego dash idea are seen as developments of the id that emerge to control the instincts so that the most favorable conditions for fulfillment can be attained. For example, people will not support someone who only considers himself because society is a balance between personal necessity and communal needs that aids all. This means that societal unacceptable behavior is repressed. It is nevertheless still at work in the unconscious of both the individual and the community. The recognition of this hidden dimension was Freud's chief, that is, contribution to psychology. However, it must be said that Freud's discovery of the unconscious was not new. He himself acknowledged that the arts and philosophy were well aware of it, but it was he who brought it to the attention of the scientific world, although he had a difficult time getting them to accept its presence and power to influence. Later, his valuation of the unconscious and the part it played in his scheme of the psyche, because less important as his emphasis focused upon the id, ego, and superego idea. This reveals the range of Freudian perception, which, when placed upon Jacob's ladder, covers the body. That is the body tree and the lower face and the middle zone of the psyche, the unconscious being a gray area above and beyond Had and the Nizah. This is where Freud and Jung parted company, for the latter was more interested in the higher dimensions of the psyche and in the subdivisions of the unconscious. Freud saw the archetypal levels of the mind, but he considered their symbolic imagery as mostly instinctive and sexual in origin. Here we see how even a great man's perception can be influenced by the astrological set of his psyche, for it is interesting to note that Freud had a Taurus sun at his birth, which inclines a person towards the sensual and earthly, and a Gemini moon, which gives an extremely analytical ego that is forever probing what the fixed sign of the bull is absorbed in. Moreover, his Scorpion ascendant not only gave rise to the acute sexual consciousness, but inclined him towards an in-depth investigation of the hidden. This combination of Scorpio Malkuth, Gemini Yesod, and Tarian Tiferet as the essence of Freud's vision and preoccupations, because he had such a temperament and was born at a specific time. He was in the right place to carry out his investigations and present his conclusions. These have evolved over the years in conjunction with those who follow him into a general plan of the unconscious, which still varies in detail according to each school. In Kabbalah, the laws of the tree indicate a distinct system of structure and dynamics, and it is interesting to see how clinical observations matches what has been given out by esoteric tradition regarding the anatomy anatomy of the psyche. Now, while Freud thought that the psyche power came from the body, Kabbalah indicates that this is only true when the upper face of the body comes into contact with the lower face of the psyche. This means that the central nervous system at the makuk of the psyche is affected by the id, the fesh, as in the da, yisad ego, and to some degree the self, which is at the kether of the body tree and the temporal of the psyche. The fact that the two trees interconnect at the same level does not mean that they share the same reality. And indeed, Freud's observations clearly differential between physical and psychological perception. It is the dod usad function of the ego that negotiates between the two worlds. And this suggests that there are two quite different kinds of energy. In Kabbalah, the body tree would certainly contain the more obvious dynamic, but physically cannot enter a more subtle order of reality any more than a chimpanzee can comprehend the meaning of Hamlet. No matter how many performances it might see, the nature of the psyche is much finer and its form more delicate than any physical process or instinct. The conversion of practical experience through the dot dash Usad interchange into the lower psyche is a quantum jump facilitated by consciousness, which can move between different worlds in the ever moving moment of, quote, now, end quote. Thus, the continual screening of imagery in the ego is the place where physical and psychological realities can meet as the person reacts to an exterior and interior situation. The effects of such transcend moments, however, are not lost but disappear across the limited threshold into the unconscious, which is a vast and complex library of experience distributed around the pillars, the sephirah, and the triads of the psychological tree. Figure 23 talks about dreams. Here, Joseph dreams of sheaves of corn bowing in a great sheaf. These symbolize his brothers submitting to his authority. While this could be wishful thinking in some, it was a prophetic projection of the unconscious as to what would happen when they came to him as the prime minister of Egypt. The unconscious has many facilities that may be divided into the personal and transpersonal. For most, such precognition is rare because the content of the consciousness, or I should say unconscious, in them is as yet undeveloped. So dreams, however, do you give much insight into the mind. This is from Banks' Bible of the 19th century. Those memories which can be retrieved into Yasada consciousness of the ego are called preconscious, end quote. These may range from what one was doing a moment ago to events in the distant past. They can be fine details of information and mood or general principles, the profound complexity of a relationship, or the simplicity of a single action. All the Yasada forms of memory are changed with some emotions or idea. Some retrievable moments may be pleasing, others unpleasant. Some will be highly infused with energy and others weak and just on the edge of recall. The chief characteristics is that they can be brought across the limited threshold and placed in the general sequence of thought, feelings, and action that goes on in the Asada ego. As such, they are considered rational, even if incon- incongruously at times, like the incongruous juxtaposition of two elements that occurs in all humor. The irrational being, the irrational begins on the margin between the preconscious and the unconscious. Here, forms that have no bearing upon what is being done, thought or felt, flit across the ego screen. For example, sometimes an idea will arise with such force that it makes one start as if something were trying to intrude. And indeed, this may be the case when the unconscious prods the conscious about some repressed issue that has been activated, such as the name of someone we prefer to forget. Here it must be said that repression, in the general sense, it is absolutely necessity, function, or the Yasada consciousness would be over cluttered and the beam of ego attention distracted by too many diversions. Sometimes the unconscious will draw attention to those, what we call repressed elements, via dreams. According to Freud's findings, day and night, dreams reveal a kind of activity not unlike that within the body. Kabbalistically, the parallel is exact. These psychological processes of digestion, assimilated material taken in by the ego, and distributed energy and matter throughout the psyche. When the ego's attention is withdrawn from the issues that have preoccupied it, the residue is deposited behind the limited line, some in the preconscious zone and the rest in the unconscious, which Freud came to see as the reservoir of psyche energy and the storehouse of personal and archaic material that maintains the unseen life of the psyche. Seen in terms of the tree, the side triads of complexes and concepts with their positive or negative charges are like the hidden organs of the psyche, continually regulating the psyche's balance in relation to ego consciousness. Thus, in the course of development, certain adjustments occur at the psyche capacity enlarges and it shifts in equilibrium. If this does not happen, like a refusal to move from childhood to adolescence, then the psyche becomes unstable and the unconscious has to regress in order to cope with and hold on to a familiar center of gravity. Thus, for example, the Sephra of Hod would become overactive as the person sought out the company of children or played childish pranks while his or her peers moved on. The correction of such fixations could be accomplished, according to Freud, by penetrating the unconscious and bringing the key experience that has stopped the process of maturation into consciousness. This he argued would release the various cataracts and anticataracts charges and allow the delay adjustment to occur. This was the other major discovery to make while mapping the lower psyche. An example of this technique was the examination of dreams, because Freud thought that the unconscious often indicated by a dream contact what was the and real difficulty. The problem most psychotic patients were relatively easy to see in dreams, but with neurotics or people who were only temporarily disturbed, this was not always so apparent, and much skill and patience had to be used to discern what is really going on within the psyche. For instance, a man might continually dream about knives. This could be symbolic of hate or judgment, or more to do impulses or sexual frustrations or guilt. Kabbalists would see it as a manifestation of Torah. In whatever context it might occur, but Freud would probably have seen it as strong as id nefesh, wish that sought to be fulfilled when the restraint of ego removed by sleep. allows some unconscious desire to express itself. Unfortunately, the psyche, as we have seen, is a highly complex organism, and it is not always clear where such symbols originate. This is made yet more but difficult because the Asada world of the unconscious does not obey the laws of physical reality. Time and space are quite different, as any dreamer knows, and such processes as, quote, condensation, end quote, can, for example, compress complicated problems into simple ciphers or even reverse unacceptable emotions like hate and their opposite as the cataracts memories are checked and counterchecked by the super-ego idea. Over a lifetime, layer upon layer, and larger groups of associate concepts and complexes accumulate in the unconscious to give an individual a distinct character. This can be seen by the perspective observer in the form of the body, which expresses the nature of the psyche that inhibits that not inhibits but inhabits it. This is because of the law that the lower world always conforms to the higher. In Kabbalah, the reading or character by the face was considered an important art for, by its features, a person's state of soul and a level of spirit that is the unconscious could be discerned. Now, while the unconscious may appear to be an incoherent muddle to the untrained eye, it is, as we can see by the way it fits into the tree, a well-ordered scheme that absorbs experiences and processes them at various levels before integrating them into the psyche. An exact analogy is the way an interval takes in all the elements and builds up a highly sophisticated system of cells and organs which operate at many different levels as a unified whole. In the case of the psyche, however, the process of growth does not cease on attaining physical maturity, but goes on all through life. Freud, who could not take into account the occult or spiritual dimensions because he wanted to address a purely scientific audience, only considered the development of psyche up to the adulthood which he saw in the physical and social terms of his time. Indeed, he was extremely pessimistic about mankind as an evolving species because he would not go beyond the id nefesh and the lower levels of the psyche. The unconscious was too entanglable and bound up, he argued, with with early memories and instinctive needs. While this may be true of much of humanity, it is not so for many people who have reached their prime and want more out of their life than having their material and egocentric wants satisfied. For such people, the unconscious is often the spur for further inner development because it contains all that has been experienced and constitutes the story of their fate so far. This state usually occurs when the individual has reached a certain level of adulthood. But before going on to this, let us take a more detailed look at what Freud meant by maturity. And that is the end of the chapter 30 here this evening. Again, this is from the book Psychology and Kabbalah. And I'm going to take a break at this point and back. So thank you for listening. Hope it's well worth your time tonight. Yes, we have a comment here. Tyler Courtney, 2266. Hello again. Thanks for reading. Yeah, you're welcome. Good to be here, Tyler. Hope you're having a good evening. These will all be put up on my after the end of the recording. I normally put them up on my Facebook account and also on my YouTube account. Okay, thank you for that comment. You take care, okay? Good evening.